Can you believe someone would actually bid on their boyfriend at a charity auction? Not just bid, but outright steal him from under his girlfriend's nose? And that girlfriend was me. I'm still reeling from it, wondering if I was crazy for what I did next. Was I overreacting? Or was my revenge absolutely justified? Tell me, honestly, would you have done the same thing if some rich girl tried to buy your boyfriend like a piece of art? Let me take you back to how this all started, because trust me, it's a wild ride. My boyfriend, Mark, and I had been together for 3 blissful years. We met in college, 2 broke students with big dreams, and an even bigger love for each other. He was studying engineering, and I was pursuing my passion for graphic design. We shared a tiny apartment, split ramen noodles, and dreamt of a future where we could afford more than instant coffee. Mark was, to put it mildly, gorgeous. He had this charming smile that could light up a room, kind eyes that always crinkled at the corners when he laughed, and a wit that always kept me on my toes. He wasn't just handsome. He was genuinely good-hearted, thoughtful, and incredibly loyal. Or so I thought. We were inseparable, the kind of couple everyone envied. Our friends often joked that we were an old married couple already, bickering playfully but always having each other's backs. Our relationship wasn't perfect, no relationship ever is, but it was ours, built on trust, shared laughter, and a deep, unwavering affection. We had talked about our future, about getting married, about the house we'd buy, even about names for our hypothetical children. It was real, palpable, and felt like it was carved in stone. The charity event was a big deal for Mark's engineering department. It was an annual gala to raise funds for student projects and scholarships, attended by alumni, faculty, and some very wealthy donors. Mark, being one of the top students, was encouraged to attend and even participate in a small silent auction. He had designed a custom-built drone, a passion project, and it was going to be one of the items up for bid. I was so proud of him. We picked out his suit together, a sharp navy blue that made his eyes sparkle even more, and I wore a simple but elegant black dress that I'd saved up for. We arrived at the opulent ballroom hand in hand, feeling a little out of place amidst the glitz and glamour, but excited for the evening. The atmosphere was buzzing with conversations, clinking glasses, and soft jazz music. It was all very sophisticated, a world away from our usual ramen nights. Mark's drone was displayed prominently, drawing a lot of attention, and he was beaming. He introduced me to his professors and some alumni, all of whom praised his talent and dedication. I felt like I was floating on air, so incredibly happy to be by his side. Then I saw her. Her name was Tiffany. She was the quintessential rich girl stereotype, straight out of a movie. Impeccably dressed in a designer gown, diamonds sparkling on her fingers and around her neck, with an air of entitled confidence that screamed, "I own this place." Her father was a major donor to the university, a titan of industry whose name was plastered on several campus buildings. Tiffany herself was a recent graduate, having majored in something vague like art history, and now dabbling in philanthropy, according to the whispers I overheard. She had this intimidating beauty, the kind that made you feel instantly inadequate. Perfect blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a condescending smirk that she seemed to wear as a permanent accessory. I noticed her looking at Mark, not just once, but repeatedly. A lingering gaze that made my skin crawl. Mark, being polite, simply smiled back when their eyes met across the room. He was oblivious, too caught up in the excitement of his drone attracting bids. I, however, felt an icy premonition creeping down my spine. The silent auction for the drone went well, surpassing Mark's expectations. But then came the main event, the live auction, and that's where things took a bizarre turn. The auctioneer announced a special experience lot. "Up next," he boomed, "we have an incredibly unique opportunity. One of our brilliant engineering students, Mr. Mark Peterson, has generously offered his time for a personalized mentorship session, assisting with a project of the winner's choosing, for an entire month. Imagine the innovation, the guidance, the sheer brilliance you could gain from working alongside one of our brightest minds. Bidding starts at $500. My jaw dropped. Mark had mentioned something about offering his time for a senior project if asked, but I had no idea it would be a live auction item, nor that it would be framed as a personalized mentorship session, with such a broad scope. I looked at Mark, wide-eyed, and he looked equally surprised, a slight flush rising on his cheeks. He hadn't expected this either. He later told me he thought it would be a small, discreet offering for a faculty member's pet project, not a public spectacle. The bidding started, slowly at first, mostly from older alumni interested in supporting a promising student. $500, $750, $1,000. Then Tiffany raised her paddle. $2,000, she called out, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the murmurs. A few more bids came in, pushing it to $3,000. Then Tiffany, with an almost bored expression, raised her paddle again. $5,000, she declared. A hush fell over the room. That was a significant amount for a mentorship session. The other bidders, mostly older gentlemen, started to drop out, looking slightly amused or perhaps intimidated. The auctioneer, sensing the shift, egged her on. $5,000 going once, $5,000 going twice. Just as the gavel was about to fall, Tiffany piped up again, her gaze fixed on Mark. $10,000, she announced, her voice dripping with triumph. My heart sank. $10,000. For Mark's time. It felt less like a donation, and more like an acquisition. The gavel fell with a resounding thud. Sold. To Ms. Tiffany Hayes for $10,000. The room erupted in applause, and Tiffany shot a victorious, almost predatory smile directly at Mark. He looked utterly bewildered, and a little uncomfortable. I tried to brush it off. It's for charity, right? I told myself. It's just a mentorship, a professional opportunity for Mark. But deep down, a knot of unease began to form in my stomach. Over the next few days, Tiffany wasted no time. She contacted Mark immediately, not to discuss a project, but to invite him to dinner. To discuss the project, of course, she had purred over the phone, according to Mark. He hesitated, looking at me with an apologetic expression. It's a professional obligation, babe. I have to. $10,000 is a lot for her to pay. I reluctantly agreed, trying to be understanding. Just be careful, I warned him. She gives me bad vibes. He promised to be home early, to text me updates. He didn't. He came home hours later than he said he would, smelling faintly of expensive perfume, and with a vague story about a late discussion about her vision for a sculptural installation that needed engineering input. It sounded like pure fluff, but I didn't press him. I wanted to trust him. This pattern continued. Dinners, lunches, project meetings that stretched late into the night. Tiffany would text and call Mark constantly, sometimes even when we were together. Her texts were increasingly possessive, demanding his attention. Where are you? Why aren't you answering? I need your input on something urgent. Mark would always look flustered, muttering about her being intense and very invested in her art project. But I saw the subtle changes in him. He was often distracted, his phone always close by. He started dressing a little sharper, paying more attention to his appearance. He was spending less and less time with me, and when we were together, his mind seemed to be elsewhere. My insecurities flared, and I tried to talk to him, gently at first. Mark, this Tiffany situation is making me uncomfortable. It feels like she's monopolizing your time, and it's not just about the project anymore. He would get defensive. Don't be ridiculous, my name. It's a professional commitment. You're being paranoid. She's just a client. A client who paid $10,000 to essentially buy his attention. One evening, I decided to surprise Mark at his university lab, hoping to catch him for a quick coffee break. I knew he was supposed to be working late on a research paper. As I approached his lab, I heard laughter, not just Mark's but a tinkling, feminine laugh I recognized. Tiffany's. My heart began to pound. I pushed open the door, and there they were. Mark was leaning against a workbench, laughing, while Tiffany stood very close to him, her hand casually resting on his arm, looking up at him with an adoring gaze that was anything but professional. There were no papers, no engineering diagrams, no sculptural installation materials in sight. Just them, bathed in the soft glow of the lab lights, looking like a couple sharing an intimate moment. My blood ran cold. The laughter died in their throats as they saw me. Mark's face instantly drained of color, and Tiffany's condescending smirk returned, wider and more triumphant than ever. Oh, hello, she purred. pulling her hand away from Mark's arm with deliberate slowness. Didn't expect to see you here. I couldn't speak. The air was thick with unspoken accusations. Mark stammered, trying to explain, but his words caught in his throat. Tiffany just watched, her eyes gleaming with malice. That night, we had a huge fight. I confronted Mark, demanding to know what was going on. He swore nothing was happening, that Tiffany was just flirtatious and misunderstood his intentions. She's just lonely, he tried to explain. And she sees me as a friend, a confidant. The project is just a cover. A cover? For what? My trust in him shattered into a million pieces. How could I believe him when everything I saw and felt pointed to something far more sinister? He begged me to believe him, swore his loyalty, but the seeds of doubt were firmly planted. The next few weeks were a living hell. Tiffany's presence became a dark cloud over my relationship. She continued to pursue Mark relentlessly, sending him lavish gifts, inviting him to exclusive parties, always subtly, or not so subtly, trying to drive a wedge between us. She would post passive-aggressive statuses on social media, tagging Mark in photos of them working late or at networking events, always with a caption implying a deeper connection. My friends started noticing, asking me if everything was okay. I felt isolated, constantly battling this wealthy, manipulative woman who seemed determined to steal my boyfriend, and a boyfriend who seemed increasingly weak in resisting her advances. He was slipping away, pulled into her orbit by her money, her influence, and his own inability to set boundaries. I begged him to cut ties, to explain to her that he was in a committed relationship, but he kept making excuses. It's complicated, my name. Her father is very powerful. I can't just burn bridges. It could affect my career. His career? Or his ego? Being chased by a rich, beautiful woman? So that's the situation I was in. Trapped between my fading trust in Mark and Tiffany's relentless pursuit. I felt helpless, heartbroken, and infuriated. I had to make a choice. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have fought for him? Walked away? Or come up with a plan to make them both regret their actions? I didn't just walk away, and I didn't just fight for him in the traditional sense. I decided to fight fire with fire, but with a strategy she wouldn't see coming. I needed a plan, a way to expose Tiffany for the manipulative person she was, and to make Mark finally choose, or suffer the consequences of his indecision. I spent days stewing, replaying every interaction, every hurtful glance, every dismissive word from Mark. I realized that Tiffany thrived on public perception and control. She wanted Mark to be her trophy, a conquest to flaunt. My revenge wouldn't be dramatic public confrontation, but a subtle, yet devastating, exposure. My opportunity came a few weeks later, at another university event. It was the annual Innovator showcase, where top students presented their projects to potential investors and industry leaders. Mark was presenting his final drone project, the very one that had been auctioned. Tiffany, of course, was there, perched in the front row, looking smug, already acting like his personal cheerleader, complete with a bouquet of roses. I, too, was there, though Mark hadn't invited me. I went with a friend, pretending to be there for moral support for her project. I wore a simple dress, nothing flashy, but I felt a quiet resolve hardening inside me. As Mark began his presentation, he looked nervous but confident. He spoke eloquently about the drone's capabilities, its potential applications, and his future aspirations. Tiffany beamed, occasionally whispering something to her equally privileged friends, clearly enjoying her perceived ownership of him. When Mark finished, there was a round of polite applause. Then the floor opened for questions. Tiffany, of course, was the first to raise her hand. "Mark, darling," she cooed, her voice saccharine sweet. "Your presentation was simply captivating. I was just wondering, since we've spent so much time on our project together, developing our vision, could you perhaps elaborate on how my influence, my insights, particularly in the artistic and conceptual realm, helped shape the aesthetic and functional design of your drone? After all, it was a month of intense collaboration, wasn't it?" The entire room turned to look at Mark, then at Tiffany, then back at Mark. Tiffany had just publicly implied a deeper, more collaborative relationship than a simple mentorship, And she was doing it in a professional setting, effectively trying to take credit for his work and stake her claim on him. Mark's face went crimson. He stammered, "Well, Tiffany, your input was appreciated, of course. But the drone's design and engineering principles are entirely my own work, a culmination of years of study." He was trying to be diplomatic, to avoid offending her and her powerful father, but his discomfort was palpable. This was my moment. I calmly raised my hand. The event coordinator, scanning the room, pointed to me. "Yes, young lady?" I stood up, my voice clear and steady, despite the tremor in my hands. "I have a question for Mr. Peterson regarding his mentorship arrangement with Ms. Hayes." Mark's eyes widened in alarm as he saw me. Tiffany's confident smirk faltered. "My question, Mark," I continued, making sure to use his name, "is about the specific nature of this collaboration. As a fellow student, and as someone who has witnessed the progression of your work over the past 3 years, I'm curious. You mentioned the auction was for a mentorship session, a project assistantship. Yet Ms. Hayes just implied a much deeper, artistic collaboration. Could you clarify for everyone here exactly what artistic project you were working on for Ms. Hayes that required such intense collaboration and resulted in her claiming conceptual input into your engineering project? And perhaps," I added, looking directly at Tiffany, "you could also clarify the amount paid for this mentorship, and if it was strictly for professional guidance, or if there were other expectations involved." A collective gasp rippled through the room. The air instantly crackled with tension. Everyone knew what I was implying. The university faculty and potential investors looked utterly scandalized. Tiffany's face went from smug to scarlet, then to a ghastly pale. Mark looked like he wanted the earth to swallow him whole. He looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes, then at Tiffany, who was glaring daggers at him. He was trapped. If he denied Tiffany's implications, he'd be exposing her attempts to take credit for his work and embarrass her in front of her powerful father. If he confirmed them, he'd be admitting to unprofessional conduct, potentially jeopardizing his academic standing and future career, and confirming that he had been leading me on. The silence was deafening. The event coordinator stepped in, flustered. "Perhaps we should move on to other questions." But it was too late. The damage was done. Tiffany, in a fit of rage, stood up, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. "This is outrageous. This is a personal attack. She's just jealous," she shrieked, pointing at me. "She's Mark's ex-girlfriend, trying to sabotage his career because I bought his time." Mark, finally finding his voice, but sounding utterly defeated, looked at me, then at Tiffany, then at the stunned faces of the faculty. He took a deep breath. "Tiffany, that's enough," he said, his voice surprisingly firm, though laced with regret. "There was no our project. The mentorship was for professional guidance, and I tried to provide it. But the artistic input you mentioned, it didn't pertain to my drone project. And the amount you paid was for my time for assistance, not for anything else." He didn't explicitly say not for me, but the implication was clear. He had, at least in that moment, chosen his integrity over Tiffany's influence. Tiffany was apoplectic. She grabbed her purse, threw her bouquet of roses onto the floor, and stormed out of the showcase, leaving behind a trail of stunned silence. Mark looked utterly miserable, but also in a strange way relieved. He looked at me, a silent apology in his eyes. I didn't return it. I simply nodded once, a gesture of, "You made your bed, now lie in it." And then I turned and walked out of the room. I had gotten my revenge, not by screaming or making a scene, but by exposing the truth in a way that truly hurt Tiffany's ego and forced Mark to confront his own actions. The aftermath was swift. Tiffany's father, enraged by the public spectacle and his daughter's embarrassment, pulled a significant portion of his funding from the university, causing a minor scandal. Tiffany herself became a pariah among the more serious students, seen as a spoiled rich girl who tried to buy her way into a relationship and take credit for someone else's work. As for Mark, his reputation took a hit. He was seen as naive at best, opportunistic at worst, for allowing himself to be so overtly pursued. His professors were disappointed, and he lost out on some scholarship opportunities. He tried to reconcile with me repeatedly, begging for forgiveness, swearing he had been manipulated, that he truly loved me. But the trust was broken beyond repair. I couldn't forget the way he had allowed her to disrespect our relationship, the way he had been swayed by her money and influence. I wished him well, but I knew I deserved someone who would unequivocally choose me, someone whose loyalty wasn't for sale. We broke up for good. It hurt, deeply, but I knew it was the right decision. I realized I couldn't build a future with someone who could be bought. It's been a few years since then. Mark has since graduated and is working at a respectable engineering firm, but I hear he struggles with a slightly tarnished reputation from that incident. Tiffany, I imagine, is still flitting from one expensive hobby to another, probably still trying to buy whatever she desires. And me? I found a new path, a new clarity. I learned a tough lesson about trust, loyalty, and standing up for myself. It was a painful experience, but it taught me invaluable lessons about self-worth and not settling for anything less than I deserve. I've since started my own graphic design business, and I'm happier than I've ever been, surrounded by people who genuinely value me for who I am, not for what I can offer them. So that's my story. A rich girl tried to steal my boyfriend, and I exposed the whole twisted mess. Like this video if you were on my side and think I did the right thing. Subscribe for more stories like this, and please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I'll see you all in the next story.